It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in to Take Command. I am Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. Logan, back in the OG Take Command studio today. I got the banner behind me and everything.
Yeah, way OG, man. Look at you.
Yeah, this happens when I actually do the podcast at work. What a concept. So today on the show, Justin Jefferson signs a new contract. What does it mean for the rest of the NFL, and how significant for a non-quarterback to make that kind of money? We'll talk about that at the end of the show. We'll also get into some of the Commanders' needs that are still potentially on the roster a little bit later. But we start, Logan, with a position that certainly could be qualified as one that potentially has some needs. And that's because we don't really know what to make of Emmanuel Forbes in this new system. But I got a text over the weekend from my guy, Tony, who you can find on TikTok, Logan, because I know you're on TikTok. TikTok and Instagram Reels and everything is Tony Squares. But Tony's just a buddy of mine that I've known since my Syracuse days. And Tony was like, is this photo a picture of a 56-year-old marathoner trying to get back on the horse one more time, or Emmanuel Forbes? And I was like, I've seen the photo, even though you cropped it. I know this is of Emmanuel Forbes. So breaking news to start Take Command. Emmanuel Forbes still pretty thin, and there's obviously a ton of nonsensical conversation about this and his size, and we've been talking about his size for the better part of a year since he got drafted, and you know, we're like, is he 165 pounds? Like, how big is this guy? Can he play corner in the NFL? But Logan, I think I certainly expected him to come into this year with a little more weight. He doesn't look like he has. I will leave this open-ended to you from here. This photo is going around. People are talking about it. The photo aside, what do you make of the substance that we're going into year 2 here, and Forbes looks to have kept the same exact body type as he came in with as a rookie?
Is that the one of him at the camp with the kid, with the camper? Is that the one?
Well, there's that. Yeah, that one. And then I think people have zoomed in on the legs and realized that the kid's got bigger legs than he does.
Well, first off, Emmanuel Forbes is like 6'1". He's like 6 foot 6'1". So he's not like a small dude. So like when you see him around the building, like height wise, you're like, oh, you're like a normal person. So that kid's gigantic. First off, he's got to be like 6'4", 6'5". Like he's a big kid. I don't know how old he is, but when I saw that picture, I was like, dang, that's a big, tall son of a gun. So again, like I think that's a little bit of one of those things where it's like, you're standing next to a big person. Like I've caught myself standing next to people that are significant. Like when I'm training Morgan Moses, for example, I'm a pretty big guy, Craig. I'm 6'4.5", 270.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's me standing next to you. Every time we decided on the Take Command pregame show to do our stand-up segment, and I was like, cool, I need a box.
Yeah. And so when you stand next to big people, you look smaller. And this kid's in high school, and I get that he's younger, but I think he's just a big guy. Because like when I stand next to Forbes from a height perspective, I'm never like, oh, you're short. Obviously, he's a slight build. And again, this is one of the things that you're constantly negotiating. Like I've played with guys who are hard gainers. I've played with guys that are, they can't lose weight. Like this is part of the deal of dealing with different body types. And everyone's kind of got their own journey and own issue to kind of work this out. My thing I keep coming back to is when you watch his film of college, dude can play football. Right? I think when you watch some of the stuff that he did last year, dude can play football. He's got good instincts. He's got good feel. He's got good length, right? So I really don't care how big he is. And everyone says, oh, what about that time where A.J. Brown, like, big dogged him? A.J. Brown big dogs everybody in the NFL. Benjamin St. Juste is 6'3", 210 pounds, and A.J. Brown will get the better of him physically. Like, there's a difference in the kind of athletes you're going against. There's an acclimation period. And I honestly believe that, like, the coaching he's going to get is going to help negate a lot of the stuff that he's doing, like a lot of the issues we saw last year. I think that's going to make him significantly better. Does he still need to play the game physically? 100%. But I do think I think he can still play NFL football. I don't think it's that deleterious. And again, this is something he's got to work on. He's got to spend time on. Like, I'm a trainer, and I had when I was in college, I had a hard time gaining weight. And people said, Logan, how did you gain 50 pounds after you got to college? And I was like, I just ate. And they were like, oh, I eat a lot too. I'm like, no, I ate like it was my job. I would get to the dining hall at 4:30. I'd eat a full dinner. My friends would come at 5:30, 6 o'clock. I'd eat another dinner with them. I'd be in like a comatose state for a little bit, and then I'd go eat another meal. Like that's what I'm talking about. And again, like it's hard. That's like not a comfortable way to live your life. But he's going to have to deal with that. And like my question, I guess my real question kind of after going through all that is like, does he actually have to play in the NFL? Because I feel like there were times last year, like in the New England game where he looked awesome and he was the same way he is now. Like, I don't understand why all of a sudden it's becoming this great big talking point, I guess.
Well, it's the middle. Well, now it's not even the middle of May. It's June, and we have nothing else to talk about. So that's typically the answer of why anything becomes a talking point this time of year. I think there are real questions, right? Because like at the end of the day, there is a physics question here, and whether you want to talk about force and the ability to tackle, whether you want to talk about the ability to withstand, like getting bodied by A.J. Brown and DJ Moore puts him on a list with a lot of other NFL corners that are a lot bigger than him. Like those two dudes, I think had a way, and I think the weight played a factor. If he was heavier, he would be harder to move. That's just math/science. But the question is, with better technique and ability to anchor leverage and a better understanding of what that physicality feels like, can you anticipate it better and make it less impactful? So the multiple things can be true at the same time. And that's where I kind of land too, is like, I think he probably would be a better football player, more impactful football player at a little bit heavier weight, because his ability to withstand contact, his ability to deliver force is just enhanced by the physics of it all. But I don't know that it has to be incredibly dramatic. At the same time, like I think it's okay to admit, like, this dude's an exception if he can play at his body type. Like, I have seen a lot of dudes with skinny ankles and skinny calves. I've never seen a dude in the NFL with like his hamstrings. Like it's not like when you get into his upper leg. And again, we're talking about this from like a trainer to like physicality, whatever, perspective here. Like, I've never seen a dude in the league that has his build. Like his waist is super skinny, his his thighs are skinny, and maybe there's an ability to play without that. But when we talk about scouting guys for the league, there's a reason we talk about body types, and like these tend to succeed, these tend to fail. There are exceptions at all positions of certain calibers. I mean, Jason Kelsey's going to the Hall of Fame. He was way undersized as a center. Aaron Donald's the best defensive tackle maybe ever, maybe the best defensive player ever, and he's not prototypical size. But I think that both things can be true. We cannot be talking about his existential ability to stay in the league or not. We can talk about whether or not a first-round pick can play like super elite high-level football at his size. And there's room to talk within those conversations while just saying the quiet part out loud, which is if he's able to do that, play at an elite level at his build, that would be an exception.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it would be an exception, but I do think the game is changing a little bit. I look at, Devontae Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles, very small, undersized guy. 100%. Tank Dell for Houston. I look at guys that I played with. I wish I could remember his first name. Last name Williams. 170-pound receiver, about 6'2", could really run, fast guy, but like, undersized. And again, like receivers, I think tend to be able to accommodate that smaller body type because they're not tackling as much. But I do think the game is transitioning. It's transitioning to a smaller body type where the size and the physics and the contacts aren't quite as important. And again, they've changed that that emphasis. The league's changed that emphasis, and I do think that you're going to get players and scouts and coaches that value movement skills over the raw physicality. Like I look at some of the receivers in this last year's draft, like Johnny Wilson is one that comes to mind. And 3 or 4 years ago, people would have been doing backflips over that guy. But like when you look at the evaluation, even my own evaluation, like I love tall, lanky wide receivers, so I love Johnny Wilson. But there's always this doubt in your head, like, does he move well enough, even though he's a very good mover for that size, to excel? And so when you watched, Devontae Adams, when you watched or any of these receivers, like the movement skill is the value. The size is becoming less relevant. And so with corners, like, with Emmanuel Forbes, for example, like one of the things that he did a great job of at Mississippi State is he moved really well. And again, I think while the size is not a non-issue, I think it's less of an issue than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago. And I also think, like, schematically, if you can communicate to this guy, I think you just look at the highs from last year coupled with the college film and say the potential is there, kind of irrespective of the body weight. And again, like, I'm not saying the body weight's a non-issue, but I think there's enough there with the change in the type of player, the emphasis on these space satellite players. He's definitely that. And a guy that has shown a willingness, he's not the best. I'm not going to say that, but he has been willing at points in his career to tackle and be physical. So as long as he can get that mindset kind of locked in and dialed in, I think he's going to be okay. But again, would it be easier if he was 15 pounds heavier? Probably, so.
Yeah, for that part of his game, no doubt it'd be easier.
Yeah.
But does he lose some of that movement skill? And I think that's the thing, is they have to decide as a staff what he is. And if he's like, no one in the history of college football has had more pick sixes than that dude's, or in the history of the SEC, or maybe both. I can't remember the stat.
I think
it's which is crazy because it was so emblazoned, and it was like their first line about Emmanuel Forbes after he was drafted. But he's done stuff that nobody else has done, and so that is also a relevant data point. That is an outlier as well, and so it comes down to like, what ultimately do you need him to be, and then. If it's, hey, dude, you're fine where you're at. We just need you to be more physical. We need you to get in there and do it. Like, he's got to do that. If it's, hey, man, we need you to put on 15, 20 pounds. Like, he's got to get in there and do it. And so it's ultimately, and I think that was the thing that, like, if you listen to Keim talk about his conversations with people last year, I don't think it was as much about the size or anything. It was like, he's not willing to do the things that they want him to do. And it was like a technique issue and a willingness issue. And so... was that because he was super uncomfortable and not being coached very well, and now he's going to take to these coaches because they're asking him to do things that make sense to him and he feels like are going to make him a better football player? Hopefully, because that'd be awesome. Yeah. It's really great when your first-round picks, whether you selected them or not, when your first-round picks work out. That's good. Yeah. And so I think that is the biggest thing is ultimately what's going to override all of this is his willingness to improve and get better, because I do not think the weight, even if we can admit, like it's feasible and reasonable to have the conversation. I don't think it's something that is a preventative thing for him of not only playing in the league, but playing at a high level. It's the other stuff. And I think that's the point that a lot of people who push back on it are trying to make is if he would do this other stuff, if he would play with the technique he's supposed to, the leverage, the anticipation, and the physicality that he was supposed to, the size wouldn't be an issue. And I think that's a totally fair rebuke to this argument.
No, I'm totally with you. And again, there was some technical stuff that he did that he had a hard time with. I remember watching games with Fred Smoot and London Fletcher, guys that have played a lot of ball, and them just being like, why would he play his two-man like that? Like, why would he do that? Like, why would he be in this position pre-snap? And again, like, I think that was a lot of the defensive stuff last year. Like when you're talking about pass rush, you're like, why are they doing, what I mean? There was a lot of questions that remained unanswered. And so I think the clarity, and again, like, we've talked a lot about the OTA practices, and the last practice we were at, I was like, he looks good. He's like getting his hands on people. He's matching concepts. He's looking like a guy that can make some plays for you. Now, again, like, this is like perfect for him because there's no pads. The physicality element is like dialed way back, but in terms of movement, route concepts, making plays on the football. He had a PBU. We didn't talk about that in the last show, but it's all good stuff. So again, like I kind of tend to agree with, and I agree with you, Craig, like if he was doing the things they were asking him to do from a technical standpoint, and also this is the other thing, this is like the football kind of hardo purist thinking. Like if they've asked him to gain 10 pounds and he hasn't done it, I bet that's extremely frustrating to the staff. I would think that's the other thing too. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that's another thing where it's like, how important is this to you? Like, for example, like when, like Santana Moss is a great example. They were like, Tana, he came in 2013. He was about 15 pounds overweight. And Mike was like, Tana, we need you to lose 20 pounds. And I don't think it was even a month. And that dude was down 20 pounds. It was like almost instantaneous. Like he just got it done. When they were like, Logan in college, we need you to gain 40 pounds. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And like, it just shows like you're dialed into the task and dialed into the process. And so I don't know what they've asked him, what they have and have not asked him to do, but I would assume they've asked him to gain weight. And I think that might be a point of frustration. But again, I have no inside information on it. I'm just speaking from my, like the old, 2010 Logan Paulson over here. So
no, 100%. And I think that's valuable perspective. I'll also add this real quick before you wrap up this conversation. And this is now my trainer brain who's spent a lot of time on like eating disorders and those types of things. Like sometimes it's not a willingness. Like for a lot of players, obviously for you were able to. For Santana, he was able to and go in opposite directions in your particular cases.
Yep.
He might have tried and it's just not like there's something else going on there that he can't. Like his body is so slender that this might just kind of be it. And so
that's a great point. It's not the same for everybody, for sure.
Yeah. And so there are medical, without getting too deep into it, but like that stuff is also really serious and really scary at times. We talk about, food and body and all that kind of stuff. Like we kind of do it flippantly in the sports world because we just kind of assume that all these guys are healthy and they don't suffer from these things. And like that's actually tremendously not true, especially at the youth levels. But again, that's a different conversation for a different podcast on a different day. But I would feel incomplete having this conversation without acknowledging the fact that, they might have asked him to put on 10 pounds and he might have tried, and it might not be in the cards for him for any number of reasons that are medical and really, frankly, none of our business. And so, again, the willingness to do the football stuff, that is our business. We talk about football in that way. But there might be some more stuff here that we don't know, which is always something we should remember when having, especially these kinds of conversations, but really probably any conversation around, things where we don't know all of the facts, which is not to get too philosophical, Logan, but most things in life. Continuing on Take Command. So corner is certainly an area where a lot of people have circled, Logan, and said, we don't know what we got here. We don't know who the starters are. Is that considered a need on this roster, both top end and depth? Feels like you got a couple of really great number 3 corners potentially, but do you have a 2? Do you have a 1? Do you have 4, 5, and 6? When you look at this roster now, is a lot of people are having this conversation crossing over this June 1st threshold where there might be another wave of cuts. Although a lot of people that have been cut with June 1st designation were actually cut a while back, and now the salary comes off the book, or parts of the salary comes off the book now that we've crossed into the 6th month of the year. But Logan, when you look at the Commanders roster through this first part of OTAs, where do you think they could still potentially realistically add and improve, either entering training camp or maybe even the next big wave of cuts is truly at the end of training camp where some more veteran players might become available?
Yeah, I think, you look at the roster and you kind of say to yourself, like corner, I think I'm really glad you started there because I don't think they're going to add anybody there, but I do think just kind of understanding like what the roles are, how the defense is going to work, and who's going to be able to best be maximized by Dan Quinn and who buys in the most and who kind of fits the culture is maybe the most compelling story of the offseason. Again, I guess they could add a guy like Gilmore. I think he's still rehabbing, still working on his shoulder, I believe, down in Texas. But right, Gilmore, is that correct? He was in Dallas last year. Stephon Gilmore you're talking about? Yeah, Stephon Gilmore. Like they could potentially add a guy like that if pieces don't develop. But if I'm Gilmore, I'm probably thinking I want to go to a team that's going to win right away, be more of a contender. But I think, again, like it's who develops, is it Michael Davis? Is it Benjamin St-Juste? Is it Emmanuel Forbes? And who can kind of fill out that roster spot or fill out that position group? But I guess I would be a little bit surprised if they added somebody. It's not impossible, but I'd be a little bit surprised if they added somebody. I think the one that I've just got circled is the offensive line, really, quite honestly. It's like, obviously, like I think the core, they've done a good job in free agency with Biotish and Cosme, I think, are good cornerstones. I think people are sleeping on Wiley and how challenging his role was last year, given the style of Eric Bieniemy's play calling. But left guard, to me, even Allegretti, Chris Paul, is still a little bit of a question mark. And then as much as I like Cornelius Lucas, and I think he can play, like there's a reason he's one of the best swing tackles in football and not one of the best tackles in football, right? His skill set is very, very good in that swing tackle role. When he's had to play, he's done a good job. It'll be interesting to see if they believe that he could be the guy long term, because if they think that, or even if they think they can get you through 8 games, then it really comes down to Brandon Coleman's development. And I think it's I was actually having this thought experiment with myself this morning when I was driving around. It's like if we had drafted Amarius Mims or Jordan Morgan or Kingsley Sumatai, are we as a media community that worried about this selection? And my answer is probably not, but I think that that's probably short-sighted because we have name familiarity with those people. We'd still be starting a rookie left tackle. And if you look at offensive line play, rookie left tackles tend to have a hard time. So I think Brandon Coleman, given his athletic profile and given his measurables, has just as good an opportunity to be a starting left tackle as those other guys, right? It's just we are not as familiar with the name, So I think that's something I would just kind of call attention to is like, you're really asking Korn to do a good job holding on the fort. You're asking Coleman to be developed, And I'm not saying he can't do it, but those are question marks. And so I could see how a fan, even myself, would be like, is there anybody we can sign? And I think you brought up a great point there. Like the left tackle market is not one where guys just randomly come free. Like the Charles Leno thing was like a total aberration when that happened.
Yeah. No, 100%. And here's the other thing that I would say, though, about like, especially Mims, but even those second round guys, I feel like if he was taken, Coleman was taken in the second round, not the third, people would be like, the short term we got to figure out, but at least we have a long term plan. I think the fact that Coleman is an unknown, not just an unknown, because all these guys are unknown, but like people are like, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Can he play tackle long term? Like people don't feel like the Commanders have a plan long term or short term at left tackle, and that is freaking them out. And I get it, because if you don't have a short term or long term plan at left tackle, you should be freaking out. However, I actually don't think that that's the case. I think that's a misrepresentation of the facts, which is their plan is Brandon Coleman is their left tackle of the future. Now, if all of a sudden he doesn't play very well and they wind up with a top 15 pick next year and there's some stud left tackle available, it's not going to stop them from taking said player and either kicking Coleman inside or moving him to right tackle or whatever the hell they want to do.
Right.
But I do think they see his upside as this is a potential top end, like top half, maybe even top 10, considering his movement skills and his length and his strength and how raw he is as a player. Remember, this is a kid who didn't start playing until high school, had to go to JUCO, and then has really only had 1 year of solid left tackle play, and of consistent left tackle play because the injuries his senior year at TCU to other people, which has caused him to bounce around. But in his 1 year of starting left tackle play, he was really damn good and started in the national championship game.
Right.
So at the end of the day, they have a plan, even if a lot of people don't see it otherwise, which I think changes this conversation, whether you're willing to kind of take their word for it, take Adam Peters' word for it, or we're doing our own kind of composite evaluations of, they think he's a tackle, but all these other smart people think, not just like analysts, but like other people in the league thought he was a guard, so actually they don't know what they're doing, and thus it's Cornelius Lucas or Trent Scott or bust, and that is not a good left tackle plan.
Yeah, and I think that, again, like, I think a lot of people tend to, and I'm guilty of this too in the evaluation, is to bucket guys as guards, tackles as guards, because it's safer. You know, it's like you're looking for something very specific at tackle. You're looking for kind of this prototype. We mentioned Amarius Mims, and like he's like what you're looking for, like a tall, angular athlete that's big but is also very powerful and it could move laterally aside. It's like it's a very specific thing you're looking for. And I think as an evaluator, you're always like, oh well, if they don't have that, then they're probably a guard. But I think like when you look at Coleman, like just as an example, I think he's a really interesting case study for evaluation. Like everything that tackles need to play in the NFL, he has. He's got great feet, he's got great length, he's got great anchor. And so it's just about, can you get him to develop and learn the position and how to play at the NFL level, right? Because again, you mentioned like the novelty of football to him. But as far as if I'm taking a shot on somebody in the third round, like he has like first round tackle measurables, but it's the indecisiveness of like, where does he play that you get him in the third round. So that's why he's such an exciting guy to me. And again, you're putting a lot on the offensive line coaches to make sure he gets ready. But I do think if you just, and this is something I do usually pre-process, but I look at everybody's arm length, everybody's 40, and then for offensive lineman height, weight. And if you look at that, like I would stop and circle him and be like, this guy is someone to keep an eye on just based on that alone. And to get a guy like that in the third round is extremely, extremely valuable. So as much as it is like he doesn't fit this kind of height, weight mold of a traditional tackle, the other stuff is extremely tackle centric. So it would be pretty fantastic. Again, if you got a starting left tackle in the third round, how awesome would that be? That would be fantastic, you know? And I think like you said, there is a very reasonable path for him to get there. But again, like I understand a lot of the fans' concerns as to why they say, oh, we need to bring another veteran in. My question is, who would you bring in? Like it's like you got to kind of make it work with the guys here at the moment, I believe.
Yeah, I think the one name that I'm really intrigued by is DJ Humphries because he played for Cliff and he is not going to be available. Like you can probably sign him whenever. I would probably sign him at the beginning of camp and let him rehab in my building so I can keep an eye on him and also be involved in all the offense and the install and let him mentor Coleman a little bit, all that kind of stuff. But he injured himself in late December last year with a big-time injury. I think it was an ACL. And he's not going to be available till the middle of the season. But if you're going to be waiting to the middle of the season for Brandon Coleman's development or another option, I would give why would you put all your eggs in the Brandon Coleman basket?
Right.
Now, if you think DJ Humphries is going to be available and he's not going to sign without checking in with you, then why would you pay him? It would be the other side of that, because then if you don't have to, you don't have to. Or if he doesn't come along from injury, like there's some risk there on the financial side. But with the amount of cap space they have, I'd probably just sign DJ Humphries at some point and be like, all right, we're either going to and he'll start season on IR, or on PUP, and he won't come off and take a roster spot until he's ready to play. And if you never need him, then great, you never need him. But at the end of the day, if you're going to rely on either Trent Scott or Cornelius Lucas to buy you 6 to 8 games anyway, at maximum, then might as well have as many options as possible when you come out of those 6 to 8 games. Other than that, Bakhtiari's missed a million hours of time or a million games over the last couple of years. I don't know that that's that intriguing. And everybody else, good left tackles aren't available because good left tackles are hard to find. And so at that point, I probably just wait to see if one gets cut at the end of camp. And that sometimes happens. We call that a Donald Penn around here. That's what happened at the end of 2019 when all of a sudden Trent Williams was like, no, I'm really not playing. What the hell is wrong with you guys? And they emergency had to sign Donald Penn. And they did. So that can happen. The Leno thing is, as you said, an even bigger aberration. That didn't happen this year where there's not any really candidates that are potentially going to get cut because some rookie's having a great camp. And other than that, I think you're just reliant on, and this is the other point I want to make real quick before we wrap this thing up, is I also just don't think it's as dire of a need as a lot of the mass media, national media says, because they look at the numbers and the sack totals and everything from last year, and I just don't think they appreciate how bad the play calling was and how set up that offensive line was in combination with Sam Howell's skill set and some of the weak points in his game to fail. And so it's not surprising that they did. They're not as bad talent-wise as people think they are. They're not awesome. I'm not telling you they're great, but they're a lot closer to average than people want to give them credit for.
Yeah, and I'm with that. I think I'm 100% with that. I think that's a great analysis. The one thing I would just say is I think the question mark on the left side is something that people are having a hard time with, but I think that's why you have training camp. Right? You have training camp to see who the best 5 are, and let's get those best 5 guys out there. And you go out and you sign a guy like Allegretti, you sign a guy like Biotish to help kind of, if you do have to play a young guy, you've got 2 guys with some experience. Then come in and be like, hey, young guy, this is who we're blocking, this is what we're doing. Make sure he's on the same page, right? And people, I know Cornelius Lucas is much maligned, but he's played well when he's had to play, and he's blocked some really good pass rushers in his time. So Again, I understand it's uncertain, but I think you bring up a great point. If the play calling is different and that group gels the right way, I've been a part of some teams that have had some, on paper, bad offensive lines, but they're fine. They work because they're better together than their sum of the individual parts. And I think that's what this group has the potential to be. And again, that puts a lot of onus and responsibility on coaching. But one of the things I love and I appreciate about Dan is he understands the value and he appreciates the importance of coaching. So he's going to make sure that the guys that he brought in, the staff that he brought in, are going to make that happen, which is, I think, something that is very important. So,
no doubt. And last but not least, sacks for a quarterback stat. We said that last year a million times, and the way Jaden Daniels is processing so far in OTAs,
feel good
looks
about
like those numbers are going to be a lot lower this year than they were last year. One way that you can cut down your sacks is you have a guy like Justin Jefferson who's open all the time, even when he's covered by 11 dudes on the other team. Justin Jefferson signed this morning as we record this a $140 million deal over 4 years with the Vikings. It is the richest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. Logan, what do you think this means for the NFL and kind of the way money has shifted by position, that a wide receiver now has that note as most or highest paid non-quarterback in the league.
Well, first off, I want to say that I think he deserves it. Like when you watch the film, man, he's a special football player. And so like I think he definitely deserves it. I think it's also indicative of the way the game is going. We talked about that a little bit earlier with Forbes and kind of how it's getting smaller and these space players are becoming more valuable. I had a conversation with somebody earlier about this specifically, and they were like, "Oh, do you think that means that the next guy is going to make $150 million or 141 point whatever as to be the new highest paid guy?" And I was like, I don't think so, because I think what teams, while they understand the importance of a top flight wide receiver, which Justin Jefferson is, Tyreek Hill is, I think they also understand that the market is saturated with the other type of receiver. And so what I think is, like, unless you are that dude, don't expect to be paid like that dude. That's honestly quite how I feel about it. It's like I think they're going to treat it kind of like the top end running backs. Like the top flight running backs still get paid decent amount of money, right? Like it's not old school money, but they still get paid more than kind of general pop. I think this will be kind of the same thing. I think you'll see a couple receiver contracts that are crazy high, but it's going to be like for the top 3 or 4 guys. And then everybody else is going to kind of be in that traditional, what you'd expect for a receiver salary. But I think he deserves it. I think he's a fantastic football player. I think he's going to make huge strides and huge inroads for whoever's playing quarterback for them. And again, this is one of those things that I think is so important is when you have a young quarterback, when you have a rookie quarterback, JJ McCarthy, you have a Sam Darnold on a veteran kind of low impact contract, you can make signings like this and make sure you keep excellent football players around. So
this is roster building. Like 101 right here.
Yeah.
Like they know what they're doing in Minnesota. There was only so far they were willing to go with Kirk Cousins because they also knew that like once we get to year 3 of Justin Jefferson's new contract, like that money's going to be like heavy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the rest of their deals would look like, but like they could have gotten a low base number in year 1 potentially for Cousins and for Jefferson, and move things around in year 2, and maybe they had some other contracts coming off the books, or they can re-sign guys at a low number for year 1 because they have to re-sign them. But for them, their breaking point was when this contract probably hits hardest in year 3. Typically, if it's a 4-year deal, the 4th year is going to have some voidability, whatever. But with the way the cap's going up and knowing that Jamar Chase is going to sign, et cetera, JJ might want a new contract by 3 years from now. So, however it is, the chances that the 4th year of this deal happens the way it is on paper right now seems pretty slim. But this dude deserves it. And to me, like, this is kind of how, like, the NFL in some ways works better than, say, the NBA. The NBA has max salaries. And what it does is it makes every team think we got to have someone who's on a max salary. And so you wind up with, like, the 28th best player in the league signing a max deal, getting paid something percentage-wise pretty close to LeBron James. And you're like, what? What? That dude's not worth what LeBron is worth because the league can't help itself. And if the incumbent team doesn't sign that guy to a max player, their best player to a max deal, he'll leave and go get it somewhere else, as opposed to all the owners going, no, and all the GMs going, no, we're not paying you a max deal. You think you're as good as LeBron? Buzz off. And that's what they should do. And so what happens in the NBA is you wind up having max deals and then a bunch of guys on minimum, and the middle class is pretty thin. I think in the NFL, you actually wind up with like a pretty nice middle to upper middle class, if you will, where you have guys like Terry McLaurin who are making really good money. And I'm not just talking about like compared to what I make to talk on the radio. I'm talking about NFL, like Terry McLaurin makes really good money, but it's not close to what Jefferson just signed for. And nor should it be, because for as great as Terry is, the impact he makes as let's call it the 10th, and I'm just pulling that number out of thin air. Nobody get too serious with it. But let's call it the 10th best receiver in football compared to what JJ does as the best receiver in football. They're not the same.
Right. No, I think that's 100% right. And I think, a lot of people are talking about, I think Jamar Chase is he's probably doing backflips after seeing this number. It'll be interesting to see what they do because Burrow's making so much money. So that'll be really interesting to keep an eye on because they don't have the flexibility of the young quarterback. But I think you're right. I think, he deserves it. And it brings that CeeDee Lamb kind of conversation up. And to me, they're not like in the same category. I think CeeDee Lamb's a really good football player. I like him a lot, but like he's not in the AJ Brown. He's not in the, Justin Jefferson category to me. Like he's in a different tier. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how the Dallas Cowboys handle it. Cause I do think while he is valuable to my organization as the Dallas Cowboys, like we're a little bit cap strapped, and I don't think that he has the same impact as those other players I just mentioned. Is he very good? Yes. But is he that kind of, is he top 5 in the NFL? I don't know. And does he deserve to be the pay that way? I don't know. That'd be an interesting question for the fans to answer in the comments probably.
Yeah, well, no one has opinions on any Cowboys player, so I'm sure we'll get nothing on that. I saw a deal floating around this morning. Like, should you do like if you're a CD or you're the Cowboys, you going like, all right, he's 4 for 140. Let's do 4 for 136. So it's like $1 million less per year. Is that when it working out? Because statistically, their production is actually like scarily similar.
I think just when you watch Minnesota, like one of the reasons, like just from an X's and O's standpoint, that I probably value Justin Jefferson a little bit more. Again, CeeDee Lamb, very good football player, like should get paid a lot of money. I just think Justin Jefferson's better because he can literally line up anywhere across the formation. He has the ability to kind of beat you vertically. He has the ability to run choice routes, slot routes underneath. Like he's a very unique talent in that regard. CeeDee Lamb, very productive in that offense, but more of a kind of big slot type guy that can win outside, but is better utilized inside. So I think his usage pattern kind of reflects, again, he's very productive, but it kind of reflects a limitation of his game that I don't think Justin Jefferson has.
You know, one thing we should do is I would like to do a deeper dive on Dak Prescott with you because in listening to a couple of podcasts from really smart people that I like a lot, I think there's a lot of like analysts that think like if they were starting a team and picking a quarterback, Prescott, like take contract out of it, Prescott's like their 6th or 7th guy. Like they're really, really high on him. And so when you talk about who's elevating who, how much is Prescott elevating Lamb? Clearly, they're both elevating each other. They're fantastic, which, by the way, is why they've won 12 games 3 years in a row. As much fun as it is to clown on them for their playoff lack of success, they've been an incredible football team, and especially offensively. But with JJ now, he's got to elevate JJ McCarthy over the next bunch of years. Like the onus is on him, both skill and financial. Meanwhile, in Dallas, it's more of a shared type of thing. And then we'll see, this is what makes the Bengals thing so interesting. Clearly Burrow's awesome. Clearly Chase is awesome. Part of it, you're just paying not to split them up. Right. But that's going to cost you T. Higgins. And it's on, both of those other guys to then make whoever replaces T. Higgins more effective in what they do. Obviously, we'll continue to discuss kind of how these teams are built, especially in the NFC East, especially as the Dallas stuff happens here over the next couple of weeks. We get into the offseason, do some of our positional rankings and all the stuff that we've done the last couple of years. In the meantime, you'll get an OTA review later in the week, so make sure you're subscribed right here to Take Command for that. For Logan, I'm Craig, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.